Alright, my camera battery died while I was doing that section, so I went ahead and finished that up off camera and figured I'd show you guys the after the final product of my correction here with the glue. I don't even know if you can make it out much, but that section there is what I was working on yesterday, and that turned out pretty well. You can see it right now if you know what to look for, but overall I think that's just fine. So I've got the next section here. I think this is about the same spot that I left off when the battery died before, and so I'll pick it up there. You might notice the lines are a bit darker here than they have been. I've been having a difficult time seeing the pattern lines with the light that I use for recording, so I just went ahead and traced over those with a pencil to make those darker for me to be able to see during the carving here. But this type of cut where it comes from with the grain to along the grain and against the grain can be kind of tricky, and you might have seen a little bit here the grain running ahead, so I'm gonna come at it from this side to help alleviate that. And that's gonna be something of a pattern on this section of the wood as I continue to have those transitions throughout this whole area where I'm going in both directions with respect to the grain and transitioning. I've been finding that especially on these inside cuts that the knife tends to want to kind of cut off early and cut off part of the ridge on these. So I've been having to really follow and keep on top of where my knife is going to make sure I don't remove more than I'm intending to. But one thing I found seems to help guide the knife is if I focus as I get to this part where it transitions across the grain to moving the board rather than the knife for the most part to follow that curve seems to make things pretty happy. You'll probably notice it depends a bit on a few factors like the intricacy of the cut and the grain direction, but my speed of my cuts kind of varies based on some of these things. So on the outside here where I'm making a new line, I can go a little bit quicker, and if I miss that exact pattern line, it's not a real big deal. But then when I'm carving back to back against that and I want to have a sharp ridge, I want to make sure that I'm being very careful to follow that precisely, and so I'll go a bit slower on those cuts. Alright, so now I've got it to the point where these two football shapes kind of meet on this joint line here, so then I'll carve that out and work my way in to out, continuing between the two sections now. And since this is all one big chip, I'm going to start all the way over here on the end. And now this section here can be a little bit fragile because the ridge that runs from this point down to the middle of the chip is going to be pretty thin. So what I'm actually going to do here, I would normally continue following this around in that pattern, but that's going to leave the inside of this as the last thing that I'm cutting, and so that could tear out on me. So just to protect that ridge, I'm going to go ahead and do this first cut right there first. So now that should prevent it from getting ripped out as I come along the rest of the cuts. Start to get too far inside there on my ridge. I'm actually going to do the same thing coming from this way. Peel back what I've got done there. Come back at it from this direction. And so I keep having that issue with the knife coming too far into the ridges, I cut into that one a little bit too, same as I did yesterday on that other one. I have to make sure I keep a close eye on that going forward. I'll go ahead and do the second kind of precautionary cut here on this side too. That's one thing I always have to be careful with on bigger projects like this, or large plates too, is that are made of multiple boards that are glued together. So that seam where the two boards come together, the wood might be a little bit different between the two, and the glue itself can cause the knife to act a little bit different. as I cut across it, so I always have to be kind of aware when I get to those spots. And usually you want to cut away from a previous chip before cutting any fresh stuff, but on this basically 3-corner chip, everything around it has already been cut out, so there's not really a great starting place. Just have to be careful with each of the cuts against a previously cut out piece. And that's about all there is to these lines and ridges. I'll continue with the rest of these, finish them up, and then move on to the 4th corner here.